Andreas is helping me with the chat. So to start with, the purpose of the webinar today is to present these newly created pesticide online website or database, online database, and just introduce you a little bit on how navigating through it. This has been the address is there. You see IPM-coalition.org, and you're invited to already navigate while we are doing the presentation. A little bit of context: this project was possible thanks to the grant from the ICL Innovation Fund, which is provided with funds from the Swiss government, with SECO, UK aid, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, and the Waddleton Family Foundation. This project took place between December last year and this year, so 1 year, 12 months. And it's developed by the ICL IPM Coalition, which was created officially, formally, with a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, signed in last year during an ICL conference. And those organizations that you see, the logos, are basically the ones. So it's mainly cotton, Better Cotton Initiative, sugarcane, Bonsucro, fair trade, which Oksana is there, addresses many, many different crops and products, or not only agriculture, but also other types of crops. Forestry, but represented by Forest Stewardship Council, coffee by the Global Coffee Platform, golf by the Global Golf Environmental Organization, Sustainable Agriculture Network, SUN, on many different crops as well, Roundtable of Sustainable Biofuels or Biomaterials, with many different crops as well, UTS with different crops. And the goal of this coalition is to reduce or eliminate the use of highly hazardous pesticides. So not all pesticides, but especially the highly hazardous pesticides, and to achieve significant reductions in risks to farmers and to the environment, pesticide risks, with certification tools and also other tools like this specific tool that we are discussing today, which is the IPM database. Why this database? Basically because producers in many places face challenges to identify which are the banned pesticides, which are the restricted pesticides. There are many different organizations that restrict or ban pesticides, or that list pesticides in one way or the other. And it's quite confusing. Sometimes you have to pay in order to get the information. And from a sustainability movement perspective, basically under organizations that are under the umbrella of ICL, we thought important to develop a common reference on the pesticides that are banned by the members. Mainly, the approach of the members is to have a negative list, but we also thought it's important to go beyond and to offer alternatives. So the idea of this website or database is to have, on one hand, like we see number 1 here, is information on the chemical pesticides, and number 2 as well, information of which pesticide is restricted under different schemes and standards. And also in number 2 objective listed in this slide, to understand why a pesticide is listed under a specific standard. What are the hazards behind this pesticide? But then the coalition was also aware that it's been, for standards have been always saying these pesticides are not allowed, and producers are always saying, so what then? What alternatives do we have? And trying to answer this question, which is a difficult question, the standards decided to work, or the coalition decided to work on this database and start to populate this database with information on alternatives. The alternative is integrated pest management as a whole, but integrated pest management, we all know it's a complex subject, it's a complex field, it's huge, and we need to start somewhere. So I will show you a little bit of what we have achieved up to now. This has not finished. The construction of this carries on until next year. And of course, the website is to be maintained next year. An intended result as well of this website that is not yet available is that there is that you can have fora, to exchange best practices so that producers or extensionists or practitioners can exchange and learn from each other by providing information as well. Going back to, so what we do have right now is the pesticide part. That is completely built, or completely until the objectives that we initially thought, because there is still more things that could be added to chemicals, like, for example, pre-harvest intervals or post-entry, re-entry intervals, etc. But that information is not yet there. Or MSDS, safety sheets, that information is not there. What we have is basically two types of information regarding the pesticides. One, we are dealing with, as mentioned before, not 100% of the pesticides that exist in the world, but those classified as highly hazardous pesticides. There is a reference definition by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations of the criteria that are made up the highly hazardous pesticides. And these are the 8 that you can find in the website. When you Google for highly hazardous pesticides, FAO, you find this is the criteria. But FAO has politically achieved the definition of a criteria in a consensus, but they have not defined the list of the pesticides that meet that criteria. And there are different ways to meet that criteria, and that makes it a bit difficult. So one of the ways that the list has been built is we are using 2 main sources, which I will show later. Basically PAN, Pesticide Action Network, which is an NGO that has been actively promoting the safe use of pesticides or the responsible use of pesticides. They have translated this criteria into a list, a tangible list. And on the other hand, we have an expert in pesticides, which is Lars Neumeister, Pesticide Experte, and he is working behind and supporting different standards in developing their lists. So some of our members have worked directly with Lars Neumeister to develop these lists, and his database is the source for this online database. Okay, so that is with so these pesticides are classified in this database of these highly hazardous pesticides in 3 groups: human toxicity, and that will refer to acute toxicity, carcinogenic, endocrine disruptor, mutagenic, and severe effects. Each of these categories refers to sub-lists or subcategories that belong, for example, to internationally recognized institutes. Like in acute toxicity, we have the World Health Organization, acute toxicity 1A and acute toxicity 1B, to put an example. So each of these categories or bullet points is backed by a different or sub-technical list. In total, around 40 lists, reference lists are behind this database. In environmental toxicity, we have the aquatic toxicity, bee toxicity, those you can read there, and others, for example, you have heavy metals as an example. The third group, which is very important for the coalition, are the international conventions, Stockholm and Rotterdam mainly, which have a lot of pesticides listed in comparison to the Montreal Protocol, which has basically 1, the methyl bromide as a fumigant. And important here to mention is that perhaps we could say these are the worst pesticides. This is a category that is doesn't exist officially. The worst pesticide is not an official category, but if I am allowed to say, if you think about governments coming to an international agreement when banning pesticides, it means that many different actors, even companies and government and civil society, have come to an agreement these pesticides should be listed as persistent organic pollutants, etc. So many of our members do include the international conventions as part of their lists. Now, looking from the other angle of the standards, we have that criteria differ among standards. And that I think most of you know already, that for each standard, a certain pesticide can be in a different criteria. And that all lists by standards, at least the member of the IPM coalitions, are based on hazard approach, which means in contrast to a risk approach. A risk approach will say this pesticide is relatively safe if you use, depending on the dose that you use and on the kind of equipment and exposure that the person applying the pesticide may be exposed to this pesticide. So the hazard approach is relative only to the pesticide. So it's a quality of the pesticide itself, independent of how it is used. So we are talking about active ingredients in this list mainly. As mentioned before, most of our members list the international conventions, and some of them refer as a reference to the Pan-International List of Highly Hazardous Pesticide, which, as I say, provides specifically a list. Which standards do we have in our database? We have 8 of the 9 members. If you see the logos up there in the slide, only the Gulf Environmental Organization has not yet developed a negative or banned list of pesticides. All other 8 have their lists, and they have 2 or sometimes 1 list, like in the case of FSC, or in the case of RSB, or 2 lists like UTS, or 3 lists even like GCP or Fairtrade. So it varies, it's different. Something that is very important that I will ask you to please share with us later on. I will send you, okay, this is the website. I will send you in the chat the link to this survey. It's a short survey that I will appreciate very much. We appreciate very much if you can fill in the questionnaire after. It should take you no more than 8 minutes overall. I am now changing my screen, and now I need to find it, to the website itself, so that we can navigate a bit and sharing with you, navigate together as an example. Okay, so it seems that you already see the screen. Andreas is telling me that he has this screen, and I hope you have it as well. If not, please let us know via the chat, something. Okay, so this is the website as it looks today. We have here, first I want to highlight, this is the home page. We have our donors that made it possible, and we have contact here in case you want to give us some feedback, comments, suggestions, questions. You can write to isaza@globalcopyplatform.org. This will change as of January, but there will always be a contact email here for you to give us your feedback, and that's important. And we start here with our menu on the left. You will find here, I want to have a look at the search function mainly, and you will be able, for example, looking for an individual pesticide. I think of one that is important, for example, in Brazil, in coffee, we have different conversations with some of our colleagues there, epoxiconazole. And you come to see this result. I have prepared already here. When I click into that name that you saw there, you come to this description. There is a Wikipedia definition that is brought from Wikipedia. We are interconnected right now, real time, with Wikipedia. At the same time, we are looking here down at the coalition status, where you see all the logos of the different standards. You see how the epoxiconazole is classified by different standards. If we see, for example, here fair trade, and you hover the mouse over it, you see that it's a fair trade 18 orange, which, and that is something you might want to know exactly what it means. But before going there, you can see that the others have different colors. For example, FSC is in black, and it says just simply FSC. For GCP, it's a GCP yellow. For RSB, there is a blank, the same as for BCI, there is a blank. And for ROOT, it's an orange or a watch list. And for SAN, it's a prohibited. And at the same time, it has exceptions. So it is prohibited, but given the conditions, there is an exception. So if we want to understand what these colors means, for example, we go to fair trade, we can go to back to our menu here and go to glossaries. If you go to glossaries and go to fair trade, I have already opened here, you will reach here, in order to save time, you will reach here, fair trade 18 orange, and basically says, I don't know if it's too small, it tells that this list contains 39 pesticides that is valid as of January 2018. It's a new list. And these pesticides may only be used under specific conditions. So the definition of what this means for the fair trade regulation is exactly there. We go back and we are curious, one more example. For example, for GCP, we see here GCP yellow. We go back then to the glossaries, and now we go to GCP, and I jump, because I have it already open here, to GCP yellow, which it should be open. You click there, and it says that this is expected, producing entities are expected to minimize the use of yellow pesticides and, if possible, phase them out completely by replacing IPM. So it is not banned, but there is a warning, it's sort of a message by GCP to use it, to reduce it. Let's go back to epoxiconazole, to where we were here in our one search of one pesticide. And we explore a little bit more down the below coalition. We go to this area where it says pesticide disease and IPM related to epoxiconazole. And we find different references here, internet web references. They are also real life connected. And we find here PlantWise, which is a CABI website with which we made a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with them for us to share their information that they have developed through many years. CABI is an organization of 48 countries. It's a multilateral organization where 48 countries participate, providing information for producers around the world. In this case, for example, we find coffee related to epoxiconazole in Vietnam, information that is relevant for Vietnam. In CABI, CABI has a focus more on agriculture, I'm afraid, for foresters and Gulf people who may be watching or participating today. But the good news is that CABI is one of the options that we will be interconnecting with, and there will be others. We would like to find one that is more relevant for forest producers and put it here and interconnect with them as well. So in this case, that's what we will find when we are navigating in our epoxiconazole substance here, and we find different alternatives. We also find here to the right the toxicity classes with whom, under which this substance is classified. It's carcinogenic by EPA, Environmental Protection Agency in the US. It's also under the EU category 1 endocrine disruptor, and is also global harmonized system reproductive, and so on. It is a fungicide. It has different names under KEC compound, PAN ID, CHEBI, and CAS number. So the different codes with which epoxiconazole is recognized under different databases that we have pulled out. And there are synonyms for epoxiconazole, even in Russian or Chinese here, you can see, or different chemical names that it has for the active ingredient. So the purpose of this is to try to put all the information of this pesticide here in terms of its toxicity, in terms of a coalition status, and that's one way of using the database. If we go now, let me go and do another type of search, and that is one of the main menus here is the pesticide database window or menu there, which opens into the 3 categories I showed you in the PowerPoint: environmental toxicity, human toxicity, and international conventions. International conventions you have to open again because most of the members of the coalition have banned these international conventions, but not all. And to be clear, it is important to realize that because a pesticide is in this website, and this is very important, please notice, it doesn't mean that it's banned in a country or that it's not allowed to be used in a country. Sometimes they are even registered to be used in countries. Many of these pesticides are still in use and will be in use for some time still. But the coalition is a front runner in terms of sustainability and regarding pesticides, and is promoting the gradual reduction and the use of these ones because of their highly hazardous nature. Okay, so let me now go to the database, and we go, for example, to here we go to human toxicity. Let me do it quickly, slower, sorry. Pesticide database, human toxicity, and I want to go to acute toxicity. I mentioned at the beginning that there are several lists under acute toxicity. And if we look here, we have 168 active ingredients under that. And we can see as well, there are some tabs here where you can go and navigate to the other lists. Let me highlight something to the right, because what I want to do now is to filter. I want to filter this acute toxicity and go specifically to one subset of the acute toxicity, which, let's say, it's World Health Organization 1A, highly acute toxicity. So I open here in the menu to the right, I click there, and there is a filter for pesticides, this green zone, where you can refine your search. You can find here and filter by coalition, but right now I'm not interested to see which coalition members have restricted this acute toxicity for the time being, but I can already notice that, for example, in parentheses, the numbers show how many BCI has. It has 3 acute toxicity that are banned, all those 168. Fair trade, 18 here has 145, for example. Okay, but that's coalition status. I want to filter further into toxicity classes. I want to click here, and I want to go to WHO1 here. Of course, today I want you to give you like a first impression, a very quick introduction. The intention for this is to just introduce you, to familiarize you, and allow you to later on navigate with more confidence in it. I am going to click here into WHO1A, and let's see what happens. You notice here in the title, you see you have selected acute toxicity, extremely hazardous, and class WHO1A. And you know in the numbers, you already can see there are even less. There are 31 substances down there. Now, what I can do here is I can do something which is very interesting, because I would like to work with the information. First, let me show you and highlight that there are different colors for the different pesticides. For example, this rodenticide, brodifaquone, you see it's banned by several standards. You would need to understand exactly to what level. For example, fair trade is 2012 is red, and GCP is red, and so on. In the glossary, you will understand exactly what kind of restriction or ban there is. It's applicable. But what I want to highlight now is that you can find here to the left down a red button which says XLS. So yes, that's Excel. That means that if you click on it, you can download the file. For purpose of our presentation today, I have already downloaded and filtered it. Oh, where did I put it? Let me bring it here. Can you see it? Resume share. Share here. Okay, so slowly, there it comes. So you should be seeing the pesticide. It's quite small. I know it's only 31 pesticides, but you have all the information. You can play around with it. I have already drawn a filter here on line 1. So you can, for example, want to know which are Bonsucro band of those, and together with GCP band, etc. You can do that on the Excel, and that's also an option. Okay, let me go back and share the website. Okay, it's here. Here, thanks. So we are back on the website, yeah. And I want to show you some other features of the menu. We have in the help, for example, you find some instructions, for example, how to search for. Then you see more detailed instructions on how to use this magnifying glass, a little bit of help instructions that might be helpful. You can also see the glossaries, which we already shared. You can see also sector news, and this is something that the website is constantly in real life collecting with some filter words. It's bringing information. Sometimes we have to refine the filters because things that are not very relevant come to it. But you can usually find, for example, information about Roundup here. Things that are in the news in different countries come up and show up here related to pesticides and to the coalition. I want to highlight now this one approach, which is basically explaining how each of the members is looking at pesticides and why. For example, if I go to fair trade, now that we have Oksana with us, let me show, or we have several of forests. We have here, we'll look now at FSC, but looking at Fair Trade International, we can see here the organization. There is information on the organization, and you can scroll down and see all the vision, etc., of the organization itself. And there's also a tab here on the specific approach of to pesticides that fair trade has. So they explain how and why they developed the list, what is the rationale behind the prohibition of pesticides, and what is their complementary approach. And there are news that are specific for fair trade here as well, if you only want to focus on fair trade for a specific reason. If we go back to approach, and we have several, Alois and Emily, I think, maybe I'm saying wrong your name, Forest Stewardship Council. We go to Forest Stewardship Council, and we have also a description of the organization. Similarly, the rationale for the pesticide, which, by the way, FSC is engaged now in a revision of the pesticide policy. This will be reflected eventually, and the news that are relevant to FSC, we hope, unless some filters are missing. But it's something that we are continuously updating with the help of our FSC representative in the coalition. And yes, and I think from my side, that's basically a quick navigation on the website. Maybe just to highlight, this magnifying glass here to the right gives you the opportunity to do a search, similarly either by cast number below or by name of active ingredient. And as mentioned before, if you go to pesticide database and you choose one of those, let's say carcinogenic, you will notice that on the right, the magnifying glass will be now accompanied by two other filters or buttons, which will help you navigate, which I explained. So with this, I want to maybe stop there, leave it there, and open the floor, give you the floor for comments and questions. If you want to unmute yourself, please do. If I need to unmute you, please tell me, let me know, because I think you are, you can unmute yourself. And we're glad to listen to your comments. We're also happy if you can fill in the survey, and if you can provide us with suggestions and feedbacks. And maybe I need to mention what's coming next as well. But let's see if there's someone. No questions. So for the time being, I can share with you what we are working on now. We are currently finalizing a more fluent and better connectivity with CABI, so that more information is displayed. And the coalition is engaged in a new project, a new grant for next year to develop an app for smartphones and tablets to make these websites available in tablets and apps. And plus an additional issue, which is bringing pesticides which are registered in countries also available. But because that is a huge task, it will start with 5 countries. And this is on a project phase, still on planning phase, and funding is being, it's almost ready. So let me open the chat. There's a question by Tariq. How often will the lists be updated in the IPM Coalition? Thank you, Tariq, for that very good question. They're very important. This information is valuable as long as it is updated. You are completely touching a key issue here. We have planned to have these updated once or twice a year in terms of the toxicity, from the toxicity side. There are not many frequent changes expected, for example, for a pesticide to become to be listed on the Rotterdam. It's something that doesn't happen very often. So we trust that once a year or twice could be agreeable. On the other hand, when standards change their lists, which happens in average every 4 or 5 years, this is something that the standards bring. And of course, it is change. As an example here today, you can see there are two lists of fair trade because they are right now in a transition, and fair trade 12 will finish its validity until December in 3 weeks from now, and it will be downloaded from our website and only remain the new pesticide list. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a very important topic. Thank you, Tarek, for that question. If somebody else has any question, we also welcome suggestions and ideas, which other websites we should be looking at and trying to get interconnectivity, which other type of information is relevant for your networks. We know it's a bit, for the time being, very much looking at agriculture. We want it to be really relevant for foresters as well. So in that case, it will be very helpful for FSC representatives and others to help us identify more sources of information which we can bring in. Also, please, we encourage you to share it with your networks, with practitioners, with users. For example, I work in the Global Coffee Platform. We have contact with the Vietnamese government through the national platform in coffee there, and they are planning to develop a national Vietnamese app for pesticides in Vietnam. And we are talking about creating interconnectivity so that when they look at international lists, they can reuse our lists so that it's all harmonized and information is consistent and everybody wins. So in that sense, please feel free to share it with your certified operators, your auditors, your certification bodies, and give us some feedback. We're very happy to collect your feedback and comments. So I think that's it, friends and participants. Thank you for attending. If there are no more comments or questions, I think we can close there, and looking forward to your comments and to your filling in the questionnaire, the survey. It really takes only 6 or 8 minutes, and we appreciate it very much that you can give us your feedback and help us improve it. So on behalf of all the 9 organizations and of the funders of the website, we thank you and say goodbye for the time being. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we're receiving comments. Thank you, Adolfo. Thank you, and I hope you can use it and find it useful. Hope it is a tool that you can that is useful, of course, and that you can help us improve it through our interaction. So in that sense, we look forward to keeping being in touch. So thank you very much, and bye-bye till the next one. Have a nice day or nice evening.